One.
So, where does PAC take place?
Well, originally we started having meetings in Victoria, British Columbia, and then I can't recall quite sure how word got around a little bit, but we started having a second sort of chapter, I guess you could call it, of PAC up in Port Alberni, also on Vancouver Island in BC. And we're hoping that it catches on and spreads around, you know, because the whole goal of PAC is a discussion, to start a discussion. I mean, when parents have their children apprehended, the ministry or Children's Aid has a way of making parents feel hopeless, and they end up, you know, they only give them so many choices, you know, either consent to 3 months of this, or we're gonna have to, you know, order in need of protection, and you're like, well, I don't want that to happen, or whatever the circumstance may be. It becomes a hopeless fight for the parent who keeps going back to court and back to court and back to court. And because social workers are allowed to use third-party and hearsay information in the court, it's very difficult to defend yourself against allegations, and you end up living with them. In the small or large communities that you live in, it affects your ability to go to work. It affects your ability to stay close-knit with your family. I mean, social workers also are allowed to disregard the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And that means that they can disclose information about anybody to anybody else. If you're a client of the Ministry of Children and Families, they can disclose information about you to, say, an ex-girlfriend, or, you know...
to get information that they're looking for.
And in the process of doing that, because some information that they've received is not always correct, sometimes it's an angry friend that made the complaint, or an angry ex. Because of that, information gets twisted, and you end up going to court and trying to defend yourself against things you can't, because they don't even need to prove what they're saying is true or not. Even when it comes to professional records, they can say, you know,
can you give us some examples of why children are taken from their parents? Some of the reasons that you've heard at the meetings?
I've heard stories from people in many provinces, and normally it's the same, you know, somebody made a complaint. Usually it's a couple fighting, they're breaking up, and one makes harsh allegations against the other, and the ministry, you know, believes them and doesn't listen to the other parent, and the children end up going in one home and not seeing the other parent anymore unless it's supervised.
But that's not the goal of the ministry, isn't it? Supposed to be to unite a family?
It is, but a lot of times they'll take information that's incorrect and make it look much different in the courtroom. Like say a parent, for example, what's an example? I mean, there's lots of reasons, but I mean, if it's because of, they may say you have alcoholism, but it may actually turn out that you've only drank like 3 times in that year. But, you know, I mean, it all has to do with who you know, too, in smaller towns. But it's not always drug addiction, alcoholism, neglect, abuse that cause child protection agencies to apprehend. Sometimes they just don't like the way you parent, and they don't think your religion is appropriate, which in my case has been brought up in court. My religious beliefs, your spiritual beliefs. I know plenty of people who have been condemned by child protection agencies because of their spirituality. I mean, obviously, look at, you know, the Native community. You know, they take Native children and put them in Christian homes.
The Native community here in BC, they have the smallest population. They're only 5 or 6% of the total child population, but yet they do make up 50% of the children in care. Is that not true?
It is true. There's also about, most of the people who've had their children apprehended are also on income assistance. These are people that, you know, whereas educated people believe that poor people are more likely to abuse, neglect, assault children, when in reality, you know, one parent is not more likely to abuse or neglect a child just because there's no money in the house. That has to do with who you are as a parent and a person. That I mean, you're not more likely to abuse a child just because you live in poverty, but you are more likely to not be able to defend yourself in the court.
Good point.
And the ministry runs on the idea of positivism, meaning they are funded by how many children go through their system, not by the success of those children.
Now, let me bring up a point. There was, over the last, I believe, from 1997 to 2005, 266 children in their care died. Is that true?
I believe so.
That was in a special report, was it not?
Well, I don't recall the statistic off the top of my head, and I don't have it with me, but I think you're talking about the joint report written by Jane Morley and the Provincial Health Officer in 2006.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
If this was a private agency taking care of, you know, upper class, middle class, upper middle class, and 266 children died in their care, this private agency, do you think anybody would be in jail?
Well, I'd like to say that it depends. I don't know, but what about the statistics, about the deaths, what strikes me as odd is that the number of natural deaths that occur are higher in foster care than natural deaths that occur for children who aren't in care, and that makes me wonder, how can natural causes be affected unless they are not doing their investigations properly, which would lead to inappropriate answers.
You said the child protection agencies are supposed to reunite families, you know, after an investigation is done and they're either cleared or not cleared. But initially they were supposed to bring families together, you know, fix the problems and bring them back together. What is their policy now?
Well, I don't know about policy, but when you think about child protection agencies, their job is to keep our children safe and, you know, and healthy and in a good environment. There's lots of factors that play into it, but the bottom line is, it is never the best thing for a child to be separated from their parents unnecessarily. The Ministry of Children, Families, Children's Aid, Métis Family Services that apprehend children, I don't know if they apprehend children or not, but the ones that do, I mean, all those child protection agencies are supposed to be supporting families in being as healthy as possible and together. Child protection means protecting your children from harm, and part of keeping them from harm is keeping them close to their parents and keeping their bonds strong. Child protection agencies are not providing us with that. They are a public servant. We are the client, and they're not supposed to be telling us whether or not we're doing the job that they want us to do with our children. Especially when, a lot of the times when you get to court, it is nothing to do with the children, it's all about you. It's all about the adults, it's all about, they don't care who abused the child may even be living with the person who abused it, but they may not be seeing the parent that didn't. I've seen them make all kinds of strange decisions that have affected children's lifelong relationships. I mean, obviously I don't stick around to see the end result, but I know from many stories that that's the way it ends up a lot of the time. In my own case, I mean, my children were apprehended while I was having an emergency surgery, and they were never given back to me. My file was closed within 3 months. Within 3 months, my children were in the custody of my ex-husband, who had been formally charged with assault, and you know, other circumstances existed that made it obvious that that wasn't the wisest choice. And now I haven't seen them in over a year because of that decision, and my situation isn't the worst I've heard.